So, to give an idea of the story, this happened about a week ago. I've been debating on whether to post this on here or not, and I finally decided to do so. I feel like I need to get this off my chest for peace of mind. For content, I'm a 25-year-old woman who is 3 months pregnant. The two people involved in this incident are myself and my brother in law, who's 19. For the sake of the story, I'll call him Jack. Now, Jack is very street smart, and on top of that, a brown belt in some martial art, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I believe, so he definitely knows how to hold his own in any difficult situation. He's an outspoken younger child in his family as compared to my husband's soft demeanor. Being the only two siblings, my husband and Jack are very close. Jack currently lives with my husband and myself. I live in a small town in California, and the three of us live in a small two-bedroom apartment. It isn't special or anything, but considering how close the three of us are and all the fun we have, it's home. The downside is that while we have good neighbors and everything, the neighborhood isn't that good. A lot of gang related crimes have taken place over the years and drug abuse is common on our streets. Anyways, onto the story. Now, being pregnant, I had the usual weird cravings, and on that particular night, I was down for some pickles. Naturally, we didn't have any at our place, so the plan of action was to go and get them at 1 am. There's a commercial area about a 25 minutes walk from our apartment complex with a huge Walmart, so that is our go to store for everything we needed. My husband was away on a business trip for the weekend, so Jack was my beck and call for everything. I told him about my craving and he got ready to leave right away. Not wanting to stay home alone at that time of the night, I decided to go along with him. I figured the fresh air would be good for me and I felt like I could use a walk, so off we went. It was a bit chilly that night and naturally I didn't realize it, so I had to make do in a tank top and yoga pants. That's until Jack gave me his jacket. We had a really pleasant walk all the way to the store, talking about everything and nothing and enjoying the walk in general. We got to Walmart around 1:25 to 30 am and spent around half an hour there. Since I frequently visit the store a lot, I am friendly with a few of the employees working there, so I spent some time talking to them as well. I got my pickles and a few groceries that I needed for restocking. I also got a few things off my maternity checklist in case I didn't forget to do so later. Jack got a few things that he needed and saying our goodbyes, we left. I will admit, I'm very naive, which I think is probably because of my sheltered upbringing. We were at the edge of the parking lot of an entire commercial area when we crossed a group of four greasy guys in their late 20s hanging around. I caught them staring, but since I was just starting showing, I didn't make much of it. There weren't many cars around either since it was very late at night. Jack and I started our journey back once again, cracking jokes and messing around with each other. He made a joke about naming my baby after him if I had a son. We were just goofing around. Little did I know how quickly things would change. Only a few minutes into our walk back home, Jack's demeanor suddenly changed. Now, I've known Jack since he was 12 and I've always known him to be very laid back and carefree. His breathing became very erratic. He was laughing way too loud at anything I was saying, and he was twirling around like he was dancing every few seconds. I thought he was just messing around with me as I'm a dance instructor, but something wasn't right with the way he was acting. He started laughing all of a sudden and said, "I dare you to shuffle sideways across the road to the other sidewalk." I thought this was very weird, but since I was in a good mood, I thought, why not? And just went for it. Jack followed right next to me doing a weird dance which didn't really make any sense. I started laughing at him when he started walking again on the other side of the road this time. Any signs of discomfort he was shown earlier had all disappeared, so I figured he only wanted to make our tedious walk home entertaining. "Okay, now back to our side of the road." I looked at him weirdly, and he had this wide grin on his face. Once again, I couldn't say no to him, so we did the same thing back. We both were laughing like crazy, and I was even in a better mood than earlier. This time, however, I noticed the same group of four guys walking about 30 yards behind us. I thought it was a bit strange, but didn't think of it as being too strange. Maybe they was going back home too, I thought. About 10 minutes had passed since we left Walmart and we had arrived near a residential area. Not apartment buildings, but typical California homes with large backyards. This particular residential area was to our left, and for our apartment, we had to go straight for at least another 2 blocks. Now, this is where it starts to get creepy and straight up terrifying. Instead of going straight like we were supposed to, Jack challenged me to a race. We turned left on the end of the block, ran that length of houses, and come back. This was very strange. He was adamant about it, but there was something different this time. He still had that weird laugh going on, but his eyes told a different story. He looked desperate, as if he really wanted me to say yes. I noticed those guys were still strolling behind us, which, at that point, got alarm bells in my head. I agreed to the race and he gave me a head start. I could see those guys staring at us at the corner of my eye. They just stopped and were simply looking our direction, making me feel very uneasy. Jack made a big show of counting down from 3, and we took off. Literally 5 seconds into our race, once we were out of sight, Jack put his hand over my mouth and dragged me to the house on our left and into the bushes. I was about to scold him for cheating when he hissed at me that we were being followed. That terrified look on his face was all I needed to see to know he was right. I felt my heart sink down into my stomach. I could feel myself throwing up any second. I had tears welling up. There was no time for any of that though because we heard voices almost instantly. Jack pushed me further under the bushes and he positioned right next to me, both of us pretty concealed by now. Sure enough, all 4 of them had turned left into the street and they were just stood there looking around. The streetlights were fairly dim, so it was pretty dark. One of them said, "I didn't know she could run this fast." Another guy mentioned something about how he thought that kid was onto them. What he said next sent shivers up my spine. "I've got my knife here for that girl. She can't resist what I say with a knife on her throat. It will dump that kid somewhere. Don't worry about that piece of shit." I could feel my throat closing up. It got difficult to breathe by the second, but it wasn't over yet. Their leader decided to look around for us. They split up and 2 of them came in our direction. My heart came all the way up my throat as I literally froze. The fear of getting caught was like ice running through my veins. One of them came up and stood right next to where we were hiding and started smoking a cigarette. The other 3 were nearby and they were going through the neighborhood looking for us. I was sure that guy closest to us would find us as he was only a few steps away. Jack turned to look at me and I could see the fear in his face. He raised his finger to his mouth, signaling me to be extra quiet. The smoker guy was pacing around us slowly. Luckily it was dark, so that played to our advantage. After what seemed like an eternity, but what actually was 30 minutes, they regrouped in the middle. One of them made a call, telling someone to bring the car around. Another 5 minutes had gone by when the car finally arrived and the men, all looking pissed off, drove off. It was too dark to clearly get the number plate, but I made a mental note of the model and the color of the car. We waited for a while before getting out from the undergrowth and brushed ourselves off. I couldn't hold it any longer and burst into tears. Jack too, with glistening eyes, hugged me, but he didn't for long. He wanted to get home as quickly as possible before these men had any chance of coming back. We got our groceries back, which were all muddy now, and made our way back home. I thought that they would pull up behind us any second. Luckily though, we made it back without any further issues. I clapped on the couch the minute we entered and double checked the locks. I was sobbing my eyes out and trying not to throw up. Jack was trying to keep it together, but I felt like he would start crying any minute as well. I honestly felt so stupid and ashamed. Here I was, 6 years older than my brother-in-law, who looked at me as the older sister he never had, and he was the one consoling me. We stayed that way for a while when he told me to get some rest. It was almost 3 a.m. I didn't have the mental capacity to do anything else, so I just went to my room and passed out on the bed. I had a load of missed calls when I woke up from my husband. Jack had called him and told him what happened. He told me he would be coming back that very day, which I was very happy about. I also told Jack how grateful I was for him being with me. We have since tried to move on from the real life nightmare, but I still feel like something is bothering me. My apartment is on the 4th floor and has a clear view of the road outside. Now, I don't know if it's my mind playing tricks on me, but I'm fairly certain I've seen those guys coming and hanging around the apartment complex at night. I've also seen them driving slowly around in what I'm sure is the same car I saw that night. I have never feared for my life or felt any sort of danger the way I have these past few days. We filed a police report, but we haven't heard anything so far. So that's my story, guys. I will keep you updated, I guess, if anything else come up and I could really use suggestions as to what I should do next. What still terrifies me is the fact that if I'd gone alone that night, or if Jack didn't feel like going, I would have probably have been assaulted or worse, and nobody would have known what happened. To understand my story, you sort of have to know a tiny bit about trespassing laws in our country, in that we don't have any, so long as they're respectful and non destructive. You can walk over any hills you like, and in my case, camp on any beach of your choosing, so long as once you leave, the area is how you found it. I used to love camping when I was little. Our family would go multiple times a year with a large group of my parents' friends and their kids. On average, there were maybe 10 of us at a time, which was a bit of a logistical challenge since we always headed out to this one really remote beach on the coast. Actually, we weren't the only ones. There were always yaks bobbing just off the shore with people in them and other campers lining up and down the beach. Most of them also had children or teenagers, so it wasn't a wild party scene. It was very much an informal family holiday spot. There was even a small building with toilets and showers installed nearby, even though this was the middle of nowhere. I guess the local council must have figured out and got sick of people peeing behind bushes. We took a trip up in spring 2011. I'm really bad with time, but I know this because I got my dog in winter 2010 after picking her out that November from the shelter as a birthday gift from me to me, as I paid her adoption fee. Oh, I know you love dogs and it should be very important to the story later on, so let me tell you a little bit about Parmesan. Parmesan came to me as a 6-month-old puppy. He had been rescued from a dogfighting situation. We're not entirely sure what breed she is exactly, but my best guess is a Lurcher Stuffy mix. She is a wonderfully well-tempered dog with people and most dogs, but he absolutely did not threaten her. She will have you. So by the time of this camping trip, I had Parmesan for a few months. She never came camping with us before, but far as my family are concerned, dogs go on camping trips, so when we all piled into the car, she came too. Unusually though, none of my family friends could make it, so it was only me, my sister, my dad, and my mum. I didn't mind it. I wasn't that attached to the other kids. I'd rather play with my dog, and I still had my sister. The drive took the best part of 6 hours, and because we left a bit later, although I don't remember why we left later than normal, we arrived at sunset. Not a good time to be building a tent, but we expected to arrive to other campers already set up and the beach illuminated in campfires, but the beach was empty. In spite of this, my parents started taking stuff out and trying to build a tent. They asked us to fetch some of the lighter bags from the boot of the car while they sat pointing a flashlight at the sun to see properly. I rolled down the window of the car for Parmesan before getting out. It was pretty hot for that time of the year and I wanted her to have some air. I always gotta be looking out for my fairy little homie. As we're fumbling about in the dark on the beach in the middle of nowhere, it's pretty spooky. The one road that led to this beach was circular and had a bridge over the water, meaning you could basically circle around the beach like a big O shape if you felt like it, but I wasn't really paying attention to the road. After maybe 15 minutes of my dad trying to nail the tent into the sand, my mum asked him had you seen our car drive around? It's been a few times. My dad kind of shrugged her off. He sort of liked that. I don't know if he said anything back to her, but after a few minutes, a car pulled up next to ours on the road and someone got out. It was maybe 15 or 20 feet from the cars to where we were, and the light was pretty low, except for the torches. We weren't expecting to see anyone else out here at this point, and I think my mum said it must be. It must be the security. I don't know why a random beach will have security. I think what she meant was the Wildlife Trust or something, as they occasionally come down to do the nosy. The guy was walking pretty unevenly, He must have been drunk or high because he had that stagger to him. There was absolutely no way this guy was sober. Cool, a junkie. Not a usual find, but it's rare to see them in the wild. As he walked into flashlight range, we realized he was carrying a large knife, maybe 15 inches. Although I was small at the time, so maybe my sense of scale was off. I don't like my dad, but credit to him, once he saw this, he got up immediately, holding onto the camping mallet and put us all behind him. The man began to shout wildly at us that we can't camp here and he would just letting us know. My dad tried to initially be a bit low key with the guy and told him that it was fine. We would leave, but that didn't work. He kept coming closer to us, so my dad started shouting and the man kept shouting back. My sister and I were crying. I remember shaking. I was utterly terrified, as I'm sure anyone would be in that situation. It really did seem like this guy and my dad were going to fight, and I'm going to be honest, I didn't fancy my dad's chances. While it was grim to consider, I'm absolutely convinced he would have killed my dad and possibly us as well once he was done, as I don't think my mother would have had the common sense to run with us. I love her, but she's always put my dad and her relationship with him above us. This isn't how it went down. A bolt from the Blacklight Wolf descending on its prey took us all by surprise, most of all the man with the knife. She got him good by the arm and clamped down hard, ripping his jacket and shredding the skin underneath. He dropped the knife as it had been in the arm she had got him by. He kicked her, he punched her, and eventually got her off. He grabbed the knife from the sand and ran back to his car and drove off. Parmesan didn't follow him. She stayed with us, muzzle covered in blood. Quickly as we could, we gathered our things and got back in the car, all pretty shook up by the incident. I looked Palmy over. She was okay, but the car window was much more open than I left it. We think what happened was when the shouting started, she must have put her paws up in the gap and left for her. As it was an old car, I had the rolly down windows and not an electric button. We think she must have been able to hit it with her paws to force it down enough to squeeze out. This is not the end of the story. We were all pretty scared, and since we had a dog with us, we couldn't book into a hotel for that night. My parents decided just to drive home so we could all feel safe, but first we had to drive into the nearest town for petrol as we were kind of low. I spent the time trying to clean Parmesan up a little. I'd always loved dogs, but what she'd done for me blew my mind. As we drove into town, we came across a petrol station, but it looked closed. My dad drove up closer to get a better look and stuck his head out the window to get a better look at the sign. My mum asked him what on earth he was doing, and he told her he was just trying to see when it opens. My heart sank. Parked in a corner behind a van we hadn't seen at first was the man with the knife. It was sitting on the bonnet of his car, using the tissue paper to clean up his arm. It looked pretty bad. Without stopping to refuel or look anywhere else in town, my dad drove right out of there. He decided to go to the next town over, but the next town over was 60 miles away. He didn't have that much petrol. We realized as we began driving we were going to break down. That's fine, Dad said. He had AA cover. They'd come tow us home, or at least to somewhere acceptable for the night. Better than staying in that last town. After driving for maybe 5 minutes, lights flashed us from behind. Another car. That same car that man been driving. It was him, following us. He must have realized we were low on petrol. The next half hour was one of the worst half hours of my life. I had a complete and utter breakdown, as did everyone really. I could tell my parents were trying to keep it on the wraps so it wouldn't upset us, but we weren't really little kids. We were both double digits. We knew how dangerous the situation was. Dad turned off the radio to conserve petrol, and the man followed us for 55 miles before he peeled away onto another road. Our fuel meter was on the big red E for empty for the last 10 miles. We were driving on fumes. I don't really believe in God, but if he does exist, this was definitely one of his miracles. Once we got there, we drove into a petrol station and refilled to a full tank before driving the rest of the way home. Sister and I slept in the car after that. I only woke up once we made it all the way home. Just grateful nothing worse had happened than that. After getting some sleep, my mum phoned the non-emergency line for the police and reported what happened. They never got back to her after that, but apparently the woman she spoke to said they may wish to in the future, as he matched the description given of a suspect wanted in relation to a murder charge. No idea if he actually was the guy or just a random psycho. As I said, they never got back to her. So, what's the takeaway then, other than Crazy Man on the beach? Well, for me, is that I love Parmesan. She's still with us now, old as the hill and twice as grizzled as one of my mom's friends likes to joke. I don't know why she did what she did that day. I couldn't tell what her thought process was. What I do know is that this poor puppy was born into an environment where they abused and neglected her, and only to be rescued and taken to a shelter where her mother and siblings all found homes before her. Despite how badly people had treated her, when I took her home, she forgave but never forgot. I think the saying is, I never trust a person who doesn't like a dog, but I always trust a dog when they don't like a person. They have a very good understanding of human body language, and I think she must have understood how much danger we were in. If you're able to, please adopt. You might find yourself in a situation like mine one day. I promise you, if you're willing to save a four-leg friend life, they will pay you back tenfold if they're able to, without a thought for their own safety. I paid £78 for Parmesan adoption fee, which is a lot when you're a kid, but it chills me down to the bone. No, if it wasn't for her, I might be dead. You're probably thinking, why didn't we phone the police while we were being followed? Well, because we had no signal, or so my mom said, but I suspect the genuine reason was that we had weed in a car. Our parents used to smoke and deal. I sat on a wooden bar stool behind a register in the nastiest gas station I've seen before or since. It was my third night in a row on a graveyard shift, despite my constant plea for daylight hours. At night, the place became purgatory. No matter how hard you scrub or how many times you mop, a thick film of filth remained on every surface. I would go hours without seeing a single car drive past. I often questioned if the rapture happened and I was the only one left. We were a stone throw from another 24-hour gas station franchise that was cleaner, properly lit, and had equipment update within the last decade. Needless to say, I had a lot of downtime. It was half past midnight. I had 6.5 hours to kill. I was reading from the first volume of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac and doing my best not to look at the clock. As I was soon learned, I was being irresponsibly unaware of what was going on around me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a brown wood panel station wagon pull up to a pump. Two men exited the car and walked inside. One looked older. He was wearing a leather jacket, the same shade of brown as his vehicle. The younger guy was close to my age. He wore a faded Carhartt coat and work boots. Both were covered in a layer of dirt or dust that suggested recent manual labor. These were country gentlemen. I greeted them and asked them what I could help them with. They told me they're not interested in buying anything, but they had to stop by and make sure everything was okay here. I was appreciative, albeit visibly confused. The younger man asked me, "Did you know you're being watched?" As he subtly gestured outside. Sure enough, I saw the dark outline of a man standing completely motionless near a streetlight. None of his features were visible, but I could tell he was staring directly at us. The older man said he'd been driving by 45 minutes earlier and almost hit him as he was standing in the middle of the road. He theorized the man was possibly on drugs. They decided to take the long way home that night to see if the guy was still hanging around. Mind you, this was 45 minutes after they almost ran the guy over. Had he been watching me this entire time? I looked outside again to find he hadn't moved a muscle. He was positioned on the border of the streetlight's illumination. I noticed his jaw was moving like he was saying something. I asked the younger man to lock the deadbolt on the front door, literally my only line of defense in the situation. They both agreed to wait with me in the store while I contacted the police. Until that moment, I maintained composure, trying not to make it obvious that I felt extremely vulnerable. Here I was, at the mercy of three complete strangers, hoping the two I had in front of me were genuinely there to help. When a dispatch operator confirmed they had units on the way, I felt safe enough to end the call. I thanked the two men profusely and they walked out the door. After pausing for a moment, they turned around and came back inside. The younger one plainly stated, "Lock the door, he's coming this way." Then immediately ducked back out the door so I can lock myself in. As I flipped the deadbolt into position, I could see the dark figure moving towards the building at an intention pace, making it across the parking lot in about 10 strides. He tried opening the door but found it wouldn't budge. He asked the older man, "Where did that girl go?" He then tried to buy me some time by saying I was in the bathroom and I would be back in a minute. So this man, this possible assailant, walks around the corner towards the bathroom door and disappears behind the building. And of course we didn't have cameras outside to keep employees safe on the job, and only 3 working securities feet happened to all be trained exclusively on where the cashier would stand. It felt accusatory. It was at this point when real fear began to set in and I lost control of my composure. This unidentified man, who had apparently been watching me for close to an hour, was now laying in wait for me to exit the bathroom. I started to hyperventilate as thoughts of what his motivation could be. Had he been watching me before tonight? Was my stall chosen at random, or did this guy come here because he saw a small female at the register? Was he actually on drugs, or was he mentally unstable enough for it to appear that way? Did he have a weapon on him, or did he plan to use his bare hands for whatever he was going to do? I peeked out the window and saw the two gentlemen exchange glances and mute discussion on how to proceed from there. Thankfully, a local police SUV tore down the street into the parking lot of the building next door, turning on its flashes and quickly coming to a stop. As soon as I was absolutely sure the man was gone, I sat on the curb outside, sucking every last drop of nicotine out of my cigarette I held in a trembling hand. As if I had telepathically summoned her, my phone rings with a call from my best friend. She said she was thinking about me and thought she would call to say what's up since she knew I would be bored. All I could respond was, "Get here, now." 20 minutes later, all my roommates showed up in a pickup truck and stayed with me long enough to feel comfortable again. As anticlimactic as this ended, it could have definitely been a lot worse. I could have been robbed, raped, or murdered, or all three, all because I wasn't paying attention. I'll never know the true will of that dark figure under the streetlight, and maybe that's for the best. I don't think I could easily get past knowing what could have lain in store for me, and I wish I could have gotten one of the gentleman's contact information so I could send a beef jerky bouquet or something really that says thank you. So, dark figure under the streetlight, once you're out of the clink, let's never meet.